Yo, my people, what's up? Welcome back to Shelf Stories, the channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. And also, welcome to the One Stop Co-op Shop podcast. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by for this latest game chat. So I have been on a kick recently. If you've noticed, I have a couple of reviews going up on the Dice Tower, different other places. I've tuned it down in complexity. I have gone family friendly and I have gone IP friendly. You see that over here? We got Back to the Future and Goonies. We got a couple of games peering out from behind my friend over here. So I had to reach out and make a connection. He is Chris Rowlands. He is the game development team lead at Funko Games and also involved with Prospero Hall Gaming game making project. There's a lot going on. So we're going to break all that down for you and we are going to have a good time on today's podcast. So Chris Rowlands, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jason. It is a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. Yes, a lot of co-op games. That's what we do on the One Stop Co-op Shop. A lot of family friendly, tune it down. The reason I wanted to reach out to you is because, I almost feel like Prospero Hall or your whole project is kind of like rescuing the IP game. Because for the longest time, right, it was like IP game. Oh, no, I'm not going to play that thing. But it's pretty reliable at this point, go into Target, pick up something that has, a Goonies or Fast and Furious. And it's pretty reliably a decent game. And I feel like that's the project here. So I wanted to get into that. But before we get into all that, introduce yourself and introduce, you talked about it before the call, Prospero Hall and Funko Games and all that's involved in bringing these games to life. So maybe you can break it down a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, thank you for all your kind words. Obviously, at Funko Games, we do a lot of IP games. We do a lot of work with a ton of really cool licensors. We don't do exclusively licensed games, but we do a lot of them. And I think it is fair to say that there's a lot of other companies in the industry that are really raising the bar when it comes to licensed products as well. So I don't know if we can take all the credit.
I'm thinking like movies, right? So like you have your Fantasy Flight, and Fantasy Flight, they got the Cthulhu and they got their, Star Wars has always kind of been geared towards games. So like those have been a little bit of a leg up. If you see a Fast and Furious game, like before 2010, if that was in the store, you could guarantee it would stink. And now that is not a guarantee anymore. So that's kind of how I approach that.
All right. Well, you said it, not me. And like I said, I appreciate the kind words. We work really hard on our licensed stuff. So my name is Chris Rowlands. I'm with Funko Games. I guess kind of give you the breakdown of Funko Games and kind of where it came from. So we previously were a design invention studio called Forrest Pruzan Creative. And we worked with a lot of other publishers to kind of create games, whether it was game design, graphic design, acquiring the art, working with illustrators. We kind of did all of that work for publishers. We were kind of like a one-stop shop. And the company has been around for nearly 20 years, making games in the mass, primarily in the mass market segments. And then I've been with the company for about 4 years now, and around 4 or 5 years ago is when we started kind of looking to make a little bit more like what you would consider hobby style games. Right. And so we did Bob Ross, The Art of Chill, with Big G Creative as publishers. We worked on the Disney Villainous series with Ravensburger as publishers. And then obviously kind of carried it on from there to do Jaws, Jurassic Park Danger, Horrified, all with Ravensburger as well. And so all of that work was done under kind of like a pen name called Prospero Hall. And that's something that if you go on BGG, you look at Prospero Hall. Right. Prospero Hall is not a person. It's actually a group of individuals, a bunch of folks who are just really passionate about game making and work in a very, very collaborative environment. And in that process, we started talking to Funko about making a game based on some of their Funko Pop figures and just generally getting into the board game business entirely. It was something that they were interested in doing. And I started being the lead designer in the game called Funkoverse that we were working with Funko. And then during that process, Funko decided to put a ring on it and acquired Forrest Pruzan Creative. And then we basically became Funko Games, which is the Funko sort of games division. And we're thrilled to to do it. We're thrilled to not only be inventing, but publishing as well now. I mean, we do have some experience with publishing. Our company founded Wonder Forge, for example, before selling it to Ravensburger. And so we do have some experience in that regard, but we're really excited to kind of forge a new path with Funko. And it's been an awesome partnership. I mean, as you can imagine, Funko has just a world-class licensing department, and we were already making a lot of really great licensed products. And so for us, it's just kind of a match made in heaven, and it's been an awesome ride so far.
Yeah, I mean, Funko, we know them from the Funko Pops, the little dolls and everything. And that was converted into a game. I think people know the Unmatched series. So Funko is kind of a similar, similar but different, but in terms of like what is it, like a 2v2 or 1v1 or 2v2, like a kind of skirmish game. You go back and forth.
So Funkoverse is basically, I don't know why they let me do it, but they let me basically make a miniatures game. And put it on the shelves at mass market, and it worked pretty well. So we took a lot of what we liked about some of our favorite miniatures games, and we took a lot of what we didn't like about some of our favorite miniatures games, and we tried to make a game that we could be proud of. And it also happens to have Funko Pop figures in it. And it happens to be based on some really, really cool licenses, and you can kind of mix and match to your heart's content and really find a team that suits your style.
Or you can just play the Golden Girls. That's how I know it.
The Golden Girls were a pet project of mine, and I was super stoked on getting a chance to make them, because in my head I was like, okay, how can I make the Golden Girls strategically viable so that some really beardy gamer shows up to Gen Con and has to play them in a tournament because they're so good. And so we definitely tried to like push the boundaries in that game. Some of our friends at Mondo and Restoration Games, I mean, I'm good friends with Rob Daviau and some of the team over there, and they're doing awesome work with Unmatched. And we do get the comparison a lot. But I think the games are pretty unique. Aside from the kind of crossover of the IPs and stuff, the games are pretty different, and they're both cool. I have my Unmatched collection up there in my closet right now.
All right, very cool. So this is the One Stop Co-op Shop. Our audience is interested in the cooperative games that you have produced. You produced a couple. These what you talked about in terms of those newer forays into the cooperative space. Now, I've not played them all because there's a bunch. It's hard to kind of have time for everything. But they're I think the biggest hit, or the one that kind of got a lot of attention in terms of that Prospero Hall imprint, was Horrified. And that was the first one that kind of caught my attention in particular. That game was really good. So let's talk about actually, before we get into that, because I mean, there's Horrified, and the ones that I've played are Back to the Future and Goonies. So Goonies just came out. So we'll go through those, one in a row. But in terms of kind of a high level hobby game approach to these these properties that you have access to in terms of Funko, how does that work? In terms of you get an IP, or like maybe Funko gives it to you, or however it happens, like walk us through a little bit of the process of we're going to make a game about this, and then how your design team begins to kind of chop that up and realize it.
Yeah, sure. So it's a process that actually happens in a lot of different ways. There's not really one set way that it can be done. And luckily, Force Present Creative, before we were even part of Funko, had a long history of working with different licenses. So when you look at something like Horrified, Jaws, Villainous, even Bob Ross, those all took place before we were actually part of Funko. Funko is kind of just like a force multiplier a little bit when it comes to licenses. And it really can happen in all manner of ways. I mean, we have a team that is really kind of passionate about all sorts of different fandoms. And so it might start with a little internal, we have a little internal forum called Blue Sky, where you can just throw ideas out there, whatever you're kind of into and you want to make games about. And so it can kind of start there, where, hey, these are some properties that we're interested in making. It can come from sometimes retailers, sometimes large retailers will come to us who we have good rapport with, and they'll say, hey, we have this spot on our shelf coming up soon. Can you make a game with this property? And we can say, yeah, let's go. We'll talk to them and see if we can get the license. And then sometimes it comes to us from licensors themselves. when you work with, when you have a track record of working with licensors and having good partnerships and having, very good working relationships with a lot of publishers or a lot of licensors, I'm sorry, sometimes they'll come to you and they'll say, hey, this is a license that might be becoming available. Would y'all be interested in putting some concepts together for some potential game ideas and those types of things? So it really can kind of go a lot of different ways. And as a game designer, I'm very privileged and blessed to be working with, the best licensing folks in the world. Like I said, Forest Creative had a long history of doing games with Disney, Dr. Seuss, all manner of licenses, like for 20 years or so.
Right.
And then when you add in the Funko sort of power behind that as well, it really takes it to the next level. So yeah, it's super fun for me as a game designer to kind of be working in that playground and know that nothing is completely impossible. Like some of the wildest licenses that I could never have dreamed of getting the chance to work on when I was growing up, I've got a chance to work on. So it's pretty cool.
Is that does that feel like a constraint sometimes? It's okay being the IP group, or is that or is that an opportunity to kind of okay, I could like a problem solving exercise? So it's like we have the IP people. What if you wanted to go kind of outside that? Do you feel like we don't really do that? Yeah, go back into the IP, or is it really good and it feels good to be kind of work within that constraint?
So yeah, I mean, there's kind of a lot of different ways to answer that question. I know, for me, before I was part of Funko Games, I was a content creator. I had a podcast, a YouTube channel.
What was it called?
My podcast was called NPC Cast.
Nice.
And I had a YouTube channel under the 1000 XP, which was sort of the publishing company that I was working on at the time. And my whole sort of ethos ever since I was, a freelancer was in trying to create new gamers. NPC Cast was a game that was about tabletop games, and it was a heavy focus on introducing people who wanted to learn about tabletop role-playing games and introducing people to the hobby of board gaming. And so when I started with Forest Creative, it was really an eye-opening experience because now you have an opportunity to work with a company who has reach in mass market retail outlets and also has access to licenses that can make new gamers. And that's like a really, really powerful thing. And it's a responsibility that we don't take lightly.
Right.
And that's what it really is to us. To our team, like working with these IPs is like a responsibility, not only to the fans of that IP who are gamers, but fans of the IP that aren't gamers. And we see it as a really cool way to introduce people to this hobby that we all love. And I think that that's kind of the thing that solidifies our team together. Now, my personal sort of design style and the way that I like to design games, I really enjoy having constraints. And so for me, getting the opportunity to work on licenses is really cool because sometimes it kind of reins me in a little bit when it comes to the game designs. And it makes you think of really outside the box solutions to some complex problems. And if done right, and I think that our team has a track record of doing it right more often than we do it wrong. And I will mention, like other folks in the industry who are starting to do some really, really cool licensed products, if done right, those constraints breed innovation. So it's not just like, oh, we can't do this mechanic or we can't cross, these two characters or whatever. Okay, well then how can we innovate and create something that gives a completely new kind of experience or a new take on a classic experience, like, for example, in Goonies.
Absolutely. I mean, actually, I think in a way you answered a bunch of my questions in terms of that sense of mission. Like, this isn't like, oh, we're going to, these games are popular, we're going to go make them. And I think that's the sense that you used to get from IP games, right? A money grab, right? I'm going to have Apple to Apples and I'm going to throw some, Golden Girls on it. Now it's Golden Girls, Apple to Apples. And that's the thing that became the, especially like, I'm old, right? I'm in my 40s. And I remember Atari, where the ET game came out. And that game was literally like, here's 6 weeks to make an entire video game from soup to nuts because we have this license, right? And so that became the the ethos of like the IP game, like that kind of had that stink on it. And so like, how do you turn the page? The answer to this, like, okay, now we have a mission. Our mission is we are going to stand firmly in the gateways. Would you? I'll ask that question in a second if you call it gateway, but like where new gamers are, right? This is where we are, and our mission is to use this as a gateway to make new gamers. So maybe talk a little bit about that term, because that comes up every once in a while, right? Gateway, and people have kind of a mixed relationship with that term.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you want to call them gateway, that's fine. I think that it's gotten a little bit of bad press because it implies sort of a gatekeeping and those types of things. And so for me, like, we just try to make the most fun games we can. And the thing that I like to tell folks who are kind of new to our studio, and just in general, who experience our games, which are all different, like,
Absolutely.
and we have a lot of people in the studio. We have a lot of different, we put out 30 games a year or something like that. We put out a wild amount of games. But our goal is not to make a game for everybody. It's to make a game that can be for anybody. And I think there's a distinction there where it's like, we know that like some of our games might be a little bit lighter than someone who's really into Twilight Imperium, right? Like if you're really into Twilight Imperium, and you're going to play, one of our games, you might not get the same thrill that you get from that. But what we do really try to do is just put the best game we can in every single box. And it's something that we really take a lot of pride on. Now, I've only been with Forest Prison for 4 years or so. But the folks sort of who are the heads of our studio, Jay Wheatley and Deirdre Cross, have been with, and from the, for a very long time. Jay is one of the founders of the company. He's been there, 20 years. And knowing them, I know that they always put this type of care into the products. However, oftentimes it gets overshadowed because, like any sort of mass market product, it's really difficult to get shelf space, and it's really difficult to kind of carve your niche. So we wouldn't be where we are today if our company hasn't spent the last 20 years actually caring about the quality of our games and the products that we put on the shelves. It's something that we're like incredibly passionate about, and it's something that we never and will never cut corners on, is the quality of the products that we put out. And over the years, that has paid off for us, and that has afforded us the opportunity to be in the position where we're at now, because we have that track record, because licensors like to work with us. They know that we're going to put as much care into the game version of their license as they would put into the movie or the show of their license, and we pride ourselves on that. And so when you're talking about this kind of responsibility, that's always kind of been there. But now we're seeing a board game boom. And so it's even more apparent that we're making new gamers. People are getting into the hobby because of games that we're putting on the shelves, and you can see it every single day. And it feels really cool for someone who's been, into games my whole life, since the early 90s, playing Magic the Gathering and playing board games and Dungeons and Dragons. Like, it's really, really cool to see games kind of have this resurgence. And like I said, I don't think we would take the credit for making quote unquote good IP games, but we're definitely one of the companies that are giving it our best.
I think, like, in terms of like I said before, the Fantasy Flight with the Arkham Horror, like, I think that's one niche, and it makes people happy. But the movies, right? These are movies. Like, these are things that everybody knows. And the fact that they're able to have, good games out of these IP that are so resonant with people, that's valuable. A couple other things. So on BGG, they kind of like track the relative weights of games, and it's gone up every single, like, the average weight of games that are coming out. Like, it just, they are like people's version of quote unquote a midweight game is creeping up. This should be just because the hobby is maturing and growing, and the gamers are sticking around. The more you play something, the easier, like, you just kind of like get used to heavier mechanisms over time. So like, the middle becomes higher and higher, and also the price. So I had a big piece on prices about a month or so ago, where the prices are up. And forget the shipping. The shipping is like a whole different thing. But like even outside of that, the prices were creeping up. And I feel like one of the things that really attracted me to Prospero Hall is the weight was what it was. It wasn't like easy. These are real games, but it isn't like a thing that I need to, take out a flow chart in order to teach my family. So I feel like that there's a downward pressure that your company's helping create, and also the price. There's a downward pressure in the price too. I imagine being in big stores helps that, but that feels like all part of kind of that mission you were talking about. Low price, easy to wrap our head around games, and access. So, is that kind of like encapsulate the mission that you're articulating?
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely pride ourselves in creating great value for folks, and the price is part of that. Also, it's a competitive environment, and so that factors into it as well. And then the same thing with the sort of complexity, the quote unquote weight of our games. I think if you look at even the mass market shelves in general, the consumer base has gotten more savvy, and people are feeling a little bit more comfortable trying what would, 5-10 years ago would have been considered like very like complex games. If you look at like, some of our stuff, like even Funkoverse as an example, like Funkoverse is a true miniatures game. Every character has different abilities. There's team building. There's different scenarios. There's like, all sorts of different factors that go into that game. And so I think that like, it's not necessarily what people might expect just looking at the cute pop figures. I mean, I personally think that there's a lot of depth to the system, and so I think those things are kind of happening. But you're totally right when you say that it's part of the ethos, because as I said, we're trying to make a game that can be for anybody, and part of that accessibility is in making games that are as easy to learn as we can make them, and at a price point that doesn't completely turn a new gamer off. Like a lot of this comes down to like consumer expectations. And if you are parents and you're used to spending a certain amount for a board game, $40 seems like a lot. So even $30 can seem like a lot when you're used to buying more mass market like games. We're not quite where video games are, where you're used to spending $60 or $70 for each one. And so I think that we try to kind of fill out our portfolio and our catalog with a wide swath of different price points and different sort of form factors. So we do have games like Back to the Future is $25 at retail, something like that. Goonies, I want to say is $30. But we also do have games that are $10 and below. We have a whole line of games called Something Wild, which are like really family weight card games that are good for people of all ages, and so those are run a little bit on the more inexpensive side. And I wouldn't discount us doing more expensive games in the future, especially as we kind of reach more into the hobby market. Rocketeer is a game that we sort of launched at Gen Con. That's a 2-player strategy game that currently is only available from hobby retailers. And so that was something that we were really passionate about, trying to sort of get that game available. So if you're listening to this and you want to find it, go to your local game store, your FLGS, and ask them to get it for you, because that was something that was really we were really passionate about.
Say more about that game, like a head-to-head competitive type game, or
it's an asymmetric game, 1 versus 1, where each you either play as the Rocketeer and his friends, or the antagonists who are trying to basically steal the plans for this rocket pack. And it's kind of like an area control battling game. Has a really, really cool card system where all 3 of your characters can use different cards in your hand, but each card might have multiple symbols. So when it's your turn to activate a character, you have a certain card in your hand. You have to choose which character you're going to attribute that card to. And so it has some really cool strategy and depth to it with the way that it plays. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. And like all, the other Prospero Hall games, or at least, in my opinion, the graphic design, the art is, next to none. So, it's definitely a really cool game that you can get from your FLGS.
Sure.
And so for us, we're kind of exploring all of those things. When you look at our team, if you look at my my Kickstarter history, I spend a lot of money on games, and I have a lot of like very large game purchases that I've made. But the general consumer is not there yet. And so we're trying to make, like I said, games that can be for anybody.
Absolutely. So let's break down 3 of them that I know will be of interest to my audience. And we'll start with Horrified. So Horrified came out, this was a couple of years ago now. We reviewed it on our podcast. We did a playthrough of it. We love it. As a entry level, I'll let you describe it. Go ahead and describe Horrified.
Yeah, so Horrified is a cooperative game based off of the Universal Monsters, and in Horrified, you're basically at the beginning of the game, you decide how many monsters and which monsters that you want to face. The more monsters that you face, the more difficult the game is, because it's like you're having to deal with Dracula and the creature from the Black Lagoon at the same time, and all those types of things. Right. And so each monster also kind of has like a puzzle / way that you have to deal with them. So there's some variety there in how the game plays, and you kind of travel around the board performing some simple actions in order to kind of defeat the monsters. It's
very Pandemic style, would you say?
Yeah, it definitely has. It shares some similarities to Pandemic in that, like you're sharing actions. Everyone kind of can do the same type of actions. This doesn't really have the outbreak feature, and because it kind of has the crossover with the different monsters, there's a little bit more variety in the core box than there is in the Pandemic core box. But yeah, it's super fun. It was a game that was invented by our studio before we were Funko Games, and was published by our friends over at Ravensburger. So yeah, and
another set is coming out, or has come out, or is coming out.
I don't know. We didn't do the most recent one, the one that's based more on the Americana monsters. I saw some friends of mine picked it up at Gen Con. I'm super excited to play it. But our team wasn't involved with Horrified. Yeah, the first Horrified was a pitch from us to Ravensburger. And then from what I know, the new one sort of builds off that system. And the lead designer on Horrified was a fellow by the name of Peter Lee, who also has worked in the past on things like Lords of Waterdeep for Wizards of the Coast and some other stuff. But like all of our games, it's really a team lift. That's something that our studio really prides ourselves on, is the fact that like everyone in the studio collaborates on all the projects. And so, that's kind of why we chose to have like a pen name, Prospero Hall, to represent all of us. And it's, worked out for us so far.
Very cool. I'm a psychotherapist in my day job. I use Horrified in therapy with younger people who are struggling with fears and nightmares. So, we play through the game, and the rhythm of the game is, very kind of horror movie tropey, which is actually works, because at the beginning of the game, every monster is invincible, right? You can't beat them. You have to just kind of like dodge them. And if they come at you, it seems all scary and everything. And I play it up. It's like, you got to play it up with the, especially the younger people, get the engagement going. And then, you find their weakness, or you do whatever the game is challenging you to do. So if you're the mummy, you have to solve the mummy's curse. And it's like this little puzzle thing. And if you're the invisible man, you're finding whatever the invisible man cares about. And then once you crack the code, then you get the power and you can go after whatever the monster is. And I find that that's a really great rhythm to show, okay, you have these fears, you're having these nightmares, you're having these experiences. Okay, how can we take the power back? And how can we, and so I've had definite times where I've helped people kind of have almost like, kind of reintegrative experiences through Horrified. So I know that I don't know if that's like came up for in terms of the design space, but I was able to really use that, because it just the way that you modeled empowerment in that game was really, really brilliant.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. And I can't wait to share that information with the team. I mean, that's something that it sounds really, really cool. And that's one of the things why, we do a lot of different types of games, but that's one of the reasons why we enjoy cooperative games so much. Sure. And I think that cooperative games are a really good entry for families who are newer to the hobby to kind of get involved into the hobby, because of the fact that you can kind of have someone who's like, acts as a mentor. Maybe it's the parents or helping out the kids or whatever. They can help them learn the game. They can kind of play together in an environment where everyone's kind of rooting for each other. And so it becomes accessible for families and something that families can feel like they do together. And so, like I said, not that we make all of our games cooperative, but it's one of the reasons that we love to do it is because we love to see sort of how families can kind of come together around the cooperative games. That's really cool. I can't wait to tell the rest of the team about that.
I do. I've used it, I don't know, for years now. And it's
awesome.
Unfortunately, because of COVID, I don't have a lot of people coming into my office anymore. Like my poor games. I don't have a lot of people, but when this is over, when people start coming back in, it's still going to be there. And I'm looking forward to trying the American version as well. So then a couple more games before we close it out. We'll talk about a Back to the Future. Back to the Future is I keep on wanting to describe the game, but I have the people who've designed the game right here. So please tell the people about the Back to the Future cooperative game.
Yeah, sure. So Back to the Future, Back in Time is our spin on a game based off the first Back to the Future film. So
the straight up first one, Doc Brown with a DeLorean in front of the clock tower. Yep.
Yeah. And so in this game, you were basically replaying a lot of the events from the first film. And it's really about sort of the narrative of the first film, which is ultimately Marty trying to get his parents to fall back in love so that him and his siblings can be born in the future. And then also to fix the DeLorean so he can get back to 1985. And so our game sort of models that arc. You are back in time. You have your different characters you can play as. You can play as Marty, Einstein, Doc Brown, or Jennifer. And each one has sort of different strengths and weaknesses. And you go around Hill Valley and you're trying to basically solve problems as they pop up. And you're trying to kind of coerce Marty's parents to getting back together and falling back in love. And in the meantime, that jerk Biff is trying to get in the way. It's trying to get in the way. And so, you have it's a dice system. And unfortunately, there's some Biff symbols on those dice, which people seem to really hate, which is cool because it's Biff, of course.
Too many Biff symbols. I think that each die has 2 Biff faces on there.
I'm not sure how many there are. But
too many.
I can tell you in testing, no matter how few or how many there are, it seems like there's too many. There's too many Biffs. But like yeah, Biff, and you can
if you play like a Burgle Brothers type, so like with the guard that's running around, it's basically Terminator. So like Biff is walking around as Terminator. Like you can kind of slow him down a little bit, but you can't stop him. And the way that there's an event card, because I just played it this past weekend with a friend, and the way the event cards just came out, like it was just Biff all the time. And I'm gonna put together my parents, and I'm gonna build up the love meter, do whatever I do there, and then the event comes out, and here comes Biff to break them up and all this kind of stuff. And it was, like with the Horrified monsters, where at that beginning of the game, Horrified monsters were like it's this force of nature that you can't do anything about, and it's just like you never feel really powerful. You're always kind of running, and I love that sense. Like I don't know if that is something that you play with as a design philosophy or just kind of emerged from the IPs themselves, but the idea that like we are, these aren't like heroes that we're playing these games. We're playing like real people who are just running from problems, and we're going to try to solve it from the very end. Is that like an intentional design philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, in this particular game, it kind of was. I mean, they never really truly. It's not like Biff is more of just like almost like this like existential threat that is just always there, and he's never really defeated per se. I mean, you can knock him down. And you can, sock them in the face. Sometimes you got to do that to bullies, I guess. But and you can kind of keep them away from Marty's parents. But ultimately, it's not about defeating Biff. That's not like the goal of the game. It's more of he's like an environmental factor. So in that game, it was kind of like that. In Goonies, it's a different type of vibe. Because the in the world of the Goonies, those kids feel like truly like they're the heroes of the story, and so we want to try to convey that in the tone.
We'll get back to Goonies in just a second.
Okay, cool.
I really enjoyed Goonies. Just one more question about Back to the Future. So this was one where I noticed that, okay, I'm playing a hobby game now, right? I mean, I guess in Horrified, I'm playing a hobby game too, but like, when you're playing a mass market game, it's like, okay, I get actions, I move my character, and it's like easy, right? In Back to the Future, it's this tile system. And you have to you start your turn. You have as many actions as you have tiles, which first of all is not something that people are used to. So that's a little bit of a step up. Okay, my action economy, quote unquote, is like how many tiles I have. And I could use and those are multi-use tiles. So like I can either get dice to accomplish the things, or I can move. So now I have these choices of, this management little thing. And it's not overwhelming, but it's still like, kind of breaking the mold a little bit. So, I mean, I guess just in general, how do you decide what kind of, action mechanism to put in each particular game? Because like that doesn't necessarily scream Back to the Future, but it felt cool. So like, I don't know, walk me through the process of like deciding what there's going to be a dice game with these tile things. There's going to be a deck builder. There's going to be all these little like, tools that game designers have in the box. How do you match that to the IP?
Yeah. So generally, in the process of how we sort of get the designs going at our studio has shifted slightly over the few past few years. But generally, every sort of design or every opportunity, I guess, to design a game is kind of put forth to the team, and we're all able to kind of riff off each other and throw ideas into the kind of the pot to see what happens. And in some cases, some games might be assigned more directly. Like we'll look at all the designers in the studio and say, okay, like Brian Kirk was the lead designer in Back to the Future, so maybe it's like, oh hey, Brian is just wrapping up this game. He has some bandwidth. He can kind of work on a Back to the Future concept, or Nate Weissman also worked on that game as a co-lead with Brian. Maybe Nate had some time to kind of work on those types of things. So that can kind of lead to one direction. There's another kind of philosophy in our studio, which is if possible, we'll just have a big brainstorm session where everyone will kind of like throw ideas out there. And at the end of that session, you might have 3 different ideas and everyone will go and kind of make a prototype, and then we'll bring them all back and we'll play through them and see kind of what resonates.
Interesting.
But something that's interesting, and this is kind of, I guess, if there's folks listening who are just interested about the process of making mass market games, it's funny that you mentioned the sort of the way that we choose actions in Back to the Future, because there's a lot of things that we as gamers, having shelves of games behind us, both you and I have shelves of games behind us, there's a lot of things we take for granted, right? And you use the term action economy, and I think as gamers we know what that is, right? But if this is your first game that you've really played that's like more of a hobby style game, you don't have a concept of action economy. And what we have found is occasionally having a menu of actions that you get to choose from, like a pandemic style menu or even like a Horrified style menu, can be a bit overwhelming and sometimes can be confusing. And so in Back to the Future, we developed this tile system to basically always show you in front of you, here's the dice that you get to use on your turn. So while there are decisions about how to spend those dice and whether you want to help other people with those dice and how you want to do those things, you always kind of have like what you can do right in front of you, and you don't have to like remember this like these complex
it's like if I discard a card here, I can move there, and
right. And so it gives you a little bit more of something that's like tangible and tactile to play with. Again, it's not that we always go that direction, but it's something that we're constantly trying to explore, because a lot of the things, like I said, that we as gamers take for granted is just going to be completely anathema to what people are used to in their other games.
Sure. I mean, it's funny that you put it that way, because I'm used to having actions, having a menu with which I can kind of plug in those actions. I found the tile system. I was like, oh, that's different. Is that going to catch on or whatever? But you come in from the opposite perspective. It's like, okay, this is actually easier for somebody who doesn't know the action menu approach. And totally. It's like, now that I can see it, it's like, okay, I have 5 tiles. I can do 5 things on my turn. And I guess in my head, I wouldn't think that would be an intuitive thing, but if your head is kind of clean, then maybe that's a little bit more intuitive to people. Is that something that you found?
Yeah, it's actually really interesting, and we really pride ourselves on our playtest scene. One of the things that kind of was the bread and butter for our studio for, like I said, 20 years is we have a really robust database of playtesters in the local Seattle area and we really pride ourselves on our playtesting and our iteration and sort of. It's really cool as a designer if I can go to our playtest team and say, hey, I need a family with a son and a daughter between ages 8 and 12, and they can find a playtest family and give me a playtest with that family. So we have a lot of we're fortunate to have those resources at our disposal. But you're totally right. With when it comes to things like this, it really is a tough balance, because on one end of the spectrum, you have something that's completely familiar. And in some ways it could be derivative, right? So like if I was to make a cooperative game, and let's say I modeled it after Horrified, and I was gonna say, okay, on your turn, you have access to these 4 actions, and you can do these things, okay? And I give that to someone who knows Horrified and say, hey, yeah, it's just like Horrified. You get these 4 actions, and they're like, okay, cool, I got it. If I change one thing, or if I decide to innovate on that system, any change I make to it becomes a possible instance where someone might be confused and it might trip them up. Sure. Because now it's no longer familiar. It's close enough to familiar to kind of fool them into thinking they know how to play it, but it's different enough that it can be confusing. And so that's one of the things that's really difficult with just innovation in general in games, is trying to bridge that gap between something that's familiar and feels like intuitive, but not allowing your preconceived notions of how you think the way things should work actually works. So it's a really big challenge, and it's one of the fun things about working on mass market games. And one of the great things with being a part of a studio that has this track record is we have folks who have been in this industry for a long time. And when I was a hobby game designer before I came here, I wouldn't have considered things like that. I wouldn't have considered that, oh hey, if coming up with a new system that kind of doesn't force people to remember a menu of actions might actually be easier to play with, even though it's not something that I personally would be used to. And those types of things are really fun to figure out.
I love that. I totally, now that you've said that, I'm like, I want to play it again. Yeah. I mean, we lost in the last turn, and, it was a very thrilling and all kind of stuff. So it's great. It's a really solid little game, Back to the Future, about back in time. There's a couple of versions of Back to the Future, but Back in Time is the one that I definitely recommend. Not just because I have Chris sitting here.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah. It's Back in Time is the one. It was one of our first first year launch titles as Funko Games.
Right.
So, we got to publish that, and yeah, it turned out really good.
Very cool. And so the last one we'll talk about, the one that I've played. Like, you see Fast and Furious and Villainous. I have not played Villainous, even though there's a whole bunch of it out there. It's the kind of game that I would want to play, but there isn't an official solo mode. So I mean, I don't have a lot of capacity to play multiplayer games, unfortunately. Work on that. I don't know. Anyway, so Goonies was one that I picked up because of, the IP, right in my wheelhouse in terms of, what I was growing up with. The price, $30, and you take it off the shelf and it's actually heavy. Like
it's really heavy.
It's really heavy.
We literally I remember, so we were working on this during the pandemic, and when we got the factory samples in, I was lead design on Goonies, and Matt Christensen was the producer on the project, and he went to the office during the pandemic. Obviously, we're all working from home remotely, quarantining and everything, but he went to the office to pick up the delivery, and he's like, man, this is really heavy. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, it just weighs a lot. It feels hefty. And I was like, okay. In my head, I'm like, yeah, I can picture that. But then when I actually got to review the samples, I was like, we pumped this box.
What are we doing?
Yeah, it was a lot. But it's good. It's a good, like I said, good value. So.
Right. I mean, and the reason it's heavy, it feels like a D&D game. That's the feeling. So you go ahead and describe it, and I'll tell you what I mean by that.
Sure. So Goonies is sort of the Prospero Hall take on a classic dungeon crawl style of board game, where it's this hybrid of RPG, but also grounded in board games. If you think of games like the one that was sort of the kickoff of the whole project was Hero Quest.
Right.
the classic sort of dungeon crawl that we all remember fondly, or at least if you're my age and
Of an
Jason's
age,
age,
yeah.
you remember from our youth.
Right.
And so that was kind of the inspiration. And so Goonies became this thing where it's like, we thought about the license, and a lot of times we'll have a license that is possible for us to make a game for, but if it's not something that we really feel like we can like do something special with, we'll kind of like say, oh, you know what, like we don't got anything.
Right.
Let's not make a game out of it just yet until we come up with something. And Goonies was one where we were sitting there and kind of riffing on ideas that we could do for it. And it has this nostalgic quality. Obviously, the film, like it's such a classic, one of my all-time favorites. Like, and Goonies is definitely one of my IP like holy grails to be able to have a chance to work on. And you just remember this sort of fantastical story that was like partly in real life, but partly kind of this fantasy childlike imagination type thing. And it got me really thinking about these retro styles of games. And someone kind of mentions like, well, we haven't really seen like a mass market dungeon crawl in a long time. Like obviously like Gloomhaven exists, right? And Jaws of the Lion was sold at Target, briefly, but they're not really like mass market, like, you can play with like your kids kind of dungeon crawls, or like aim for that demographic. And so we're like, well, what if we bridge those two things? Could we make like a dungeon crawl Goonies game that not only feels nostalgic because of the film, but feels nostalgic because of the play patterns? And so that was kind of the start of it. From there, we try to say, really update the genre and see like what innovations could we make to this genre to make it feel more modern. I don't want to talk. I was the lead designer on Goonies. I can talk about it forever.
Yeah.
I love this game. So I'm down to answer questions. But for example, there are things like the board. When you open up the board and you set up an adventure, there's 9 adventures in the game. And I don't think this is too much of a spoiler, but the first 3 adventures take you through the scenes from the film, and then adventures 4 through 9 branch off into a sort of a new storyline that extends beyond the film. And each adventure, you have a Goondocks master who will set up the adventure and kind of play as the NPCs, the foes, and they'll set everything up. They have a GM screen.
It's one versus many games. If people, I know we throw out these terms, so it's like, there's one player and then there's a team of the rest of the players. So then, totally. It's a cooperative game, so to speak, in my broadened definition of cooperative in the sense, like there are people cooperating at the table. So like for most of you, it'll feel like just a regular cooperative game, but then there's one player who has to kind of jump on the grenade. Usually the person who owns the game or the person who's, read the book or whatever it is, they run the game, so to speak.
Yeah. And I'm glad you used the term jump on the grenade because, as our research for this game, we played a lot of these dungeon crawl games. And one of the things that we do that's kind of innovative in this game is the way the role of the GM has a lot more agency over the course of actions that take place. So you have the board, and when you open the board, you'll see all these different caves and rooms, but you don't see any connections between them. Right. And that's because as you play the game, the map sort of unfolds itself via the Goondocks master playing down tunnels and pathways, and you can find secret passages and those types of things while you're playing the game. But the other thing that really sets it apart that I think is innovative in this space is that the Goondocks master has a deck of cards, and the deck changes depending on the adventure. There's some cards you shuffle in and shuffle out, or take out and shuffle in. And every turn they can play cards in their hand to like add foes to the board or lay traps. And all their cards also can react to what the Goonies players are doing. Right. So it's a big difference between stuff like Hero Quest, which is a lot more formulaic. You do have the person who's running the game for the players, but they don't really have a lot of agency over the choices they're making. Mm-hmm. In Goonies, we really wanted the player who's quote unquote jumped on the grenade to have to
glad you resonate with that phrase
to feel like they're taking part of it. No, right. I think it's true because it's like that was the big thing. One of the big things, and it's the same thing. We did a 1 versus many game called Jurassic Park Danger that I was also the lead designer on, and it's like it was a really big sticking point for Jurassic Park Danger and for Goonies, Never Say Die. And hey, if someone's gonna be the one at the table, we have to give them tools to make it fun for them, because at the end of the day, it's like, it kind of sucks to have everyone team up against you and like want to take you down, like it's not a great feeling. everyone else is laughing at your misery. So it takes
I
a very
think,
special type of player to do it.
The roughest part about being the one is that you're not, so in a lot of these games, you're not really playing. You're like the facilitator of fun.
Totally.
So, it's like I'm doing things and and so as you described, in Goonies, you have your little screen and you're putting down the tunnels and you're shorting out your monsters. It would have been really easy to be like, okay, you are the facilitator of fun, throw them monsters, and then but secretly kind of root for the the team and everything like that. I definitely felt like I was because I was the one. I did feel like I was competing against and that's what I want. That's all I want out of a once versus many game, because in a lot of games, even like Descent got this way, where I'm, I would almost like ruin the fun of everybody else at the table if I won or if I went at him. So it's like, this felt a little bit more like, okay, I had permission to kind of go at the player. And then, the way you structure it, you finish a scenario. If the GM were to win, still go on. There's like little things that happen, but like you don't stop dead. You just play the next scenario.
Yeah, it was really important for us to kind of try to thread that needle. And I'd like to think that we did a good job. To me, when I'm playing as the Goondocks Master, I'm trying to keep it close. But I don't really care. I honestly don't care if I win or lose. Like personally. No, totally.
I wouldn't win.
But that's the thing, right? Is we wanted to make a game because we knew that people who are not used to this style of game were going to pick it up, and not used to RPGs were going to pick it up. And so we wanted to make something that the Goondocks Master felt like they could have agency. Like your goal explicitly in the rules is to win, is to beat the players. However, the way that you do that is up to you. So that if you are playing and you want and you're kind of just helping facilitate and you more want to have the Goonies have a good time and experience the adventure, you can kind of lighten up as well. So it's not so like binary.
Okay.
And you have a lot of choices for how you're taking your actions. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we wanted it to be fun for the Goondocks Master. We didn't want them to feel like they were just stuck doing all the busy work while everyone else was making fun choices. So we really try to jam pack that role with a lot of different options, so that in addition to giving them decisions to make, every adventure if you play it over and over again, it will be different. Like you can try, like as the Goondocks Master, you can say, okay, this adventure, I'm going to try to throw out as many monsters as foes as I can, use my cards to do that. This adventure, I'm going to throw out as many traps as I can and see if I can, get them that way. I'm going
to mess with the Goonies, stun them over. I'm going to try to divide them, use the cave-ins and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so you have, so the adventure, they have some amount of replayability because the cards are going to be different every time. And so that was something else that was like really kind of important to us. Again, I can talk about Goonies for a long time. I don't want to take all your time.
Well, no, again, we were, I guess, trying to answer like these little design questions. So it's like it feels like every single game was a field. Again, going back to the kind of original point of like, okay, the original, way back yonder was like, okay, how can I deliver unto the people IP it with like a game veneer? And I feel like what Funko has helped do, what Prospero Pro has helped do, is kind of turn that paradigm around totally to say, okay, how can this IP, how can we realize this IP using modern mechanisms? How can we realize this IP and bring quote unquote, substantial gaming? I'll say it that way, substantial gaming to the masses. And, it sounds like each individual game is an opportunity to kind of like answer those questions in a different way. That's kind of why that's really the main reason I wanted to kind of how talk through that. And you've confirmed because it definitely shows in each of the products.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, again, I think that for me, as a lead designer on Goonies, I'm really, really proud of that game. And I think that it also does something that, in my opinion, is going to be really interesting to see IP games in the future build upon the sort of the foundation of Goonies Never Say Die, in that not only are you able to play through the film as you know it, but I don't know how many adventures have you played, Jason?
I've read I've read a couple, but I've read all 9.
Okay. So
I had to know what happened.
So the story, it goes pretty far
Yep.
beyond pretty far beyond the film in a way that
it's fanfic. You get some real good fanfic in there in the best possible way. Yeah.
Right. And I think that officially licensed fanfic. But I think that it's gonna, like, to me, it's a really interesting opportunity to explore, like, okay, like, this isn't just a game about like the Goonies film. It's really about like what Goonies is, and like it really taps into the themes of the Goonies. And the thing that I kept saying when we first started this project is and we all have different views about these nostalgic properties, and they're all nostalgic for a lot of different reasons. Jay Wheatley, who's our the creative head of our studio, talked a lot about how to him the resonant thing about Goonies is this idea of friendships being fractured, and sort of like this impending peril of like these are your childhood friends and you might not get to see them again, like you're off the move, and there's this kind of foreboding nature to it. And that's definitely one aspect of the film. For me, it was about like that childlike wonder that I had when I was a kid, in the 80s and 90s, where it's like, the woods behind my house, there could be anything back there. There could be treasure buried in the woods behind. Like, it's like this, like your imagination kind of like taking you away on these adventures and these stories. And so that's kind of what we wanted to play up in this game, is that, like, what if the story kept going, and how far could it go? And we have the expansion coming out later this year that takes it even farther. So
very cool. Yeah. All right. And so that we can close on that. Let's talk about the future. So more Goonies is coming, and I think I saw an alternate like you released a box art at least for. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that it might have even been available at Gen Con. I'm not sure, but it's the Teenagers expansion. Mm-hmm. So it has Annie, Steph, and Brand as playable characters, and then it has 3 new adventures that continue the narrative. Mm-hmm. It gets even wilder. To the folks who have played through the campaign of Goonies and know how wild the story gets, it gets even wilder. Mm-hmm. And so that's on the horizon. I cannot say anything about it, but we did announce the game that's tentatively titled Jurassic World Legacy, which is a legacy game set in the universe of Jurassic World. And I am not allowed to say anything else, so I'll try to bite my tongue on that. But that's coming up as well. That's going to be really cool. And
is that another cooperative game, or one versus many? It's like the first Jurassic.
I literally don't.
You can't say
it. It's cooperative.
Got it.
I'm sorry, marketing team, if I wasn't supposed to say that. I don't know. It's cooperative.
It's the What's Up Co-op Shop. Get our people excited.
Yes, it is a cooperative legacy game. It is very cool. And it's pretty rad.
Very cool. I just had Rob Davio on the show, so he still has he has not played a legacy game that he hasn't designed. So maybe this will be the first legacy game that he hasn't designed that he'll play.
Maybe. Rob and I are buddies. So
sure.
So I hope
throw it on over there.
I hope he gets a chance to play it. He's a really good dude. And I think that totally. It's funny because in a way, when I was kind of getting into game design, Rob had already left Hasbro. Mm-hmm. to do his own thing, and he was always viewed as sort of like a he was a role model in this types of stuff he did, and in the work that he was able to do in the mass market. I mean, you talk about like mass market, like you quote unquote mass market games, like Risk Legacy was like the first legacy game, and it was like based off Risk, and that was like his brainchild. And so it's really cool to kind of like see how it's like I admire him to this day. I think he's a tremendously talented individual, and is just an even better dude. And to see him kind of work on mass market and then work on hobby games, and for me to kind of work on my hobby games and now work on mass market games, it's like weird to see those parallels. But we love what Restoration Games is doing, and all those dudes are super cool. So
sure. Yeah. And the beat rolls on. But you release like dozens of games a year, up and down mass market, totally $10.
We have announced. We have Warriors. We have the Warriors signature game announced. That is also a cooperative game. as well.
Keep them coming, baby. Keep them coming.
And beyond that, I don't know what else we have announced, but we have a lot of really cool stuff on the horizon. Some signature games, some smaller games, some other Funkoverse stuff as well. Building upon that. I don't know if you're familiar with the Marvel Battle World stuff. Marvel Battle World is like another cooperative collectible line. It comes with these little like battle balls with like little Marvel figures in them. Cool. And each battle ball you can open and play a game with, but there's also like collectible figures that you can kind of track down, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun. And we got more of that coming, and yeah, we're just gonna keep cranking away, and who knows what the future holds.
Absolutely. Well, I know what the future holds. More of these games in my tables.
I appreciate that.
Chris Rollins from Prospero Hall, thank you very, very much for taking the time to come on my show.
My pleasure, Jason. It was fun talking to you.
If you can change your mind, you can change the world, people. So until next time, later, everybody. All right, so we are going to hit the after show right now. I'm going to be totally honest. That whole interview was half bupkis. That is not the reason I want to talk to Chris Rollins. The reason I want to talk to Chris Rollins is because he's an AEW fan.
Oh, I am an AEW fan. Okay, all right. Hold on. I got the.
Here it is.
I got the Pentagon. Got the Pentagon mask. I am an
Pero miedo. I don't know what it was, but like a bunch of your tweets, I maybe wanted somebody I followed, just pumped your stuff, but like all of a sudden, like 5 of your tweets came in, and it was like, okay, game designer, cooperative games, AEW. I'm like, I got to talk to this man.
That's awesome. It's fun. It's weird.
How far do you go back with How far do you go back with the rest of them?
Oh, I mean, I've been a wrestling fan forever. Since the early. I mean, I remember. I don't remember what show it was. I remember I grew up in Florida. I remember getting taken to a show. Like my babysitter, her like boyfriend at the time took me to a show, and I remember seeing Sting. This was back when he had like the Surfer Sting stuff.
Right. The bright neon glow in the dark Sting.
Yeah, and he was like my favorite. I remember watching it as a kid.
It must be blowing your mind that you're watching him now.
It's
like
wild.
61 years old doing cross bodies off the top.
It's wild. He had that he had that comeback match. So they did like the cinematic match.
Yeah.
And
I was always going to look good in that.
Yeah, I was like, okay, that's great. Use him for that.
Right.
And then they had the real match. I was like, oh no, this is going to be bad. And then he takes that bump on the
outside. Then
and I was like, is he like wearing like a body armor or something? And then he does the cross body off of it. It was like, man, he can still go.
Yeah, looks pretty good.
Anyways, I've been a wrestling fan for a long time. You know, like most wrestling fans, so there's a couple of years where I lapsed out of it and then got back into it. Right. But I've been loving the AEW stuff.
So I mean, what is the by the way, we're not talking about board games, people. I may ask one right at the end, but like I need to indulge my passion because there's not that many of us out there. So what was the why AEW? What appealed to you about that whole new thing?
So for me, the thing that I really liked about the AEW stuff was I had been following a lot of those folks from New Japan. I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of New Japan. Yeah. So like I was big into the Kenny stuff and all the young bucks and everything like that. And so I kind of heard that they were starting their new thing, but I was someone who watched like BTE and stuff like that. And so for me, and I'm a big fan of indie wrestling. So like, obviously it's a pandemic, so I'm not really going to shows anymore, but there's a lot of local promotions here in the Seattle area that I would go to like on a regular basis. Like every show I'd be at front row. Like, nice. I actually got to see the Lucha Bros up close and personal. There's a really famous video of Aubrey Edwards, who is also from the Seattle area. She was reffing their match at a place called Defy up here in Seattle. And she was going for the count 1, 2, and then Ray Phoenix super kicks her, and the crowd goes like bananas. And I'm actually in the background of the video, like just like my jaw open, like I can't believe that just happened because Aubrey is so over in Seattle.
Yeah.
Anyways, but yeah, so I was a big fan of indies and stuff, and to me the thing I like about it is like I'm just rooting for them. You know, they're like they're the underdogs, and like and they're just good. They seem like good people, and you know, and I love the fact that like they're giving like indie wrestlers like a chance, you know, and the opportunity.
Yeah, like the Orange Cassidy types, you know, people that just they would never appear on a major promotion anywhere else.
And even, you know, and hearing all the stuff, you know, that Tony Khan did, you know, during the pandemic when, you know, when people asked him, they're like, hey, you know, your roster's getting pretty big. He's like, you know, are you going to cut people? And he's like, to be honest with you, no. Like, it's hard to get work during the pandemic. I'm not going to cut anyone. Like, if anything, he was giving all those people work every week, you know, on Dark and stuff. So to me, it's just like I just want to root for him, you know, and I like the product, and it's not to say that like it's like perfect, you know, they make mistakes and stuff, but like I don't know, it just gives me good vibes, and it's a feel good story, you know, to have these like this group of like outcasts and misfits who are just like getting like to be creative and make a name for themselves. So that's why what's your biggest
issue with AEW?
There's a couple of issues that I have, I guess. I mean, like, I think that, I think the women's division kind of, I think that it wasn't a focus early on, and you could tell, and a lot of the wrestlers were green. And I think a lot of that was because their vision for the women's division really relied on the Joshi wrestlers who during the pandemic weren't able to come over. And so it's like, it really like kind of put the brakes on. I think it's definitely getting better, you know, having Ruby Soho there. Britt obviously is amazing. Statlander is great. They have a lot of great,
and Thunder Rosa. Oh my God, she's my girl.
Yeah, Thunder Rosa is great.
I remember her when she was a hoe on the hoe train.
I saw a picture of it.
Unbelievable.
I didn't know that, but yeah, she's great. Yeah, and so I think the women's division is really getting better, you know, but a lot of them are green, and because of that, they need experience, and they're getting that. I wish it was a little bit more of a focus, you know, but like, I think they're trying to fix that, you know, and I know that the plan is to put a sort of a women's, more like quote unquote mid-card belt on, maybe Renegade or something like that, but, or Rampage, I'm sorry. So I know they're going to kind of build that division more. So I'd like to see that more. And I think that generally, like, it seems like they're getting better at it, but there are some like production issues, especially early on. Like, you know, some of the camera work wasn't like the best at times.
Yeah, they still do this sometimes though. Quick cut during an impact move.
Yeah.
So like, you know, you're seeing like it is all impact moves. Like it's all like the flippy stuff. And you know, if you're doing a Bucks match, like, I mean, I can't say, you know, how many times am I going to see like, you know, in midair guys doing a 630 and then a cut to something else. And it's just, if you notice it, it's disorienting. If you're just there to kind of like enjoy the show like a circus, then you might not be noticeable. But if you really want to like see stuff, then it's hard to kind of get. And it's just like one example among a couple of others that.
Yeah, and I think they have, you know, noticeably they've gotten better at that though, and like you know, and it's still not as bad. Like WWE has a lot of cuts. Sometimes it's kind of disorienting, but I remember like
I don't even want to talk about them.
I went to the first All Out.
The one in Chicago?
No, is it
All Out was Chicago, and then All Out was
which one was in Vegas?
Double or Nothing.
I have the poster. Double or Nothing.
The one where Moxley slammed what's his face on the chips.
Yeah, where Moxley debuted. So I actually me and my friend flew out to that show, and I watched it live, and it was like awesome. And then I went back and I bought it so that I could watch it again, like at home, you know, with some friends. And there was some stuff. Obviously, it's like their first show, basically. There's a lot of stuff that like I was like live. I was like, oh, they totally missed this like spot, like on the video. Like it's like they just, you know, because back then they were even more green, but they've gotten better. So I don't know, but it's like again, like, and this is what a lot of folks I think who are just like for whatever reason hate on AEW don't get is it's like. There's not much there's nothing that they can do outside of, you know, something that's really problematic or terrible that's going to make me not root for them, you know. It's like it's like the whole exploding ring thing that didn't like go off as planned. It's like, yeah, it sucked, I get it, but like I still root for them. In fact, the fact that I'm fans of them, it makes me like empathize for them more, you know. And people don't get that. Like people, I like AEW and I want them to do well. Like, and if they do poorly, I don't get mad at them. I just hope that they do better. Like that's kind of where I'm at with it. So
if Tony Khan were to call Funko, which I imagine has been a thought, if it hasn't happened already. So, and if you don't, if it hasn't happened, you could say mom if it's happened already. But if Tony Khan were to call, because there's an AEW games division, it's digital right now, but I imagine they would not be against tabletop. There's yet to be a good wrestling board game. Have you had ideas about how you would execute a wrestling board game?
Yeah. I mean, like, so there's a lot to unpack there. Obviously, I can't talk about like any sort of licensing things or any of that stuff. I'm super looking forward to the video game, the console game, because obviously No Mercy and all those games are like the best wrestling games of all time.
Right.
But yeah, I think of like there's a lot of wrestling games that I would like to make and I think could be cool. And I'm not the only wrestling fan in our studio. So like if we had the opportunity, it'd be really sweet to make wrestling games. Have I, thought of it as like an official part of my work at Funko Games? I can't really say. But as a wrestling fan who's also a game designer, like, of course, I thought about designing wrestling games. Like before I worked, when I was a hobby designer, I had a game called Wrestle Frenzy that was like a real-time game loosely based off of the Royal Rumble, where it's like you're playing cards and you're trying to basically play through your deck and you're trying to eliminate every person had a stack of wrestlers and split evenly, and you're trying to play combos and you're trying to eliminate them, and the person who wins is the last person who has wrestlers from their stable still in the match. So you're kind of just like eliminating everyone. And back in the day, I used to collect pen and paper RPGs, and there was a tabletop RPG that was WWF, the WWF adventure game, and I remember it very well, and it was a lot of fun. But yeah,
what kind of adventures did you go on?
It wasn't really, they called it the adventure game, but it wasn't. It was like you're playing like a role-playing game set in the WWF, and you're doing matches. There is also, and I've had it on my shelf here, Worldwide Wrestling is a newer tabletop RPG that's pretty cool, and it's based around wrestling. And the fun twist in that game is that you play your character in-ring persona and you play your character out of the ring. And so in the ring, you might be like tag team, like we might be a tag team, but out of the ring, we might secretly hate each other.
Right.
And so you get to role play all those different kind of relationships.
Maybe I'm Hawk and I'm a real
there's all sorts of stuff.
I mean, like, would it be possible to do like minis? Is that something that, can even think, I think of like, wrestling so fast paced, and especially with AEW, they're so athletic. And it's like, does that even translate at all? Or, I don't know. I
don't know. I think there's a lot of ways I don't think anything's off the table, right? Like, I think there's a lot of ways you can go with it. For me, there's a lot of things I love about wrestling. I tend to really get into the in-ring storytelling.
Sure.
That's why I like New Japan and all that stuff. And so for me, that's like a big part of it. But there's also like, storylines and all those types of things. There's like, there's economic games. You can make a game set in the territories where you're like trying to, build out your territory, and it's totally like a Euro game. Like there's so much richness to it that like I wouldn't count anything out. But I don't know. I like wrestling. But yeah, whatever it is about AEW, and I think it was like part of it is that they're also really like those group of guys with what they did with BTE, it was the first like real look at these people. It's like I'm not a fan of your character. I'm a fan of you as a person,
right? And
like as a performer, and so it breaks that wall, that fourth wall. And I think that like for me, that's just really appealing. And so the rest of it, I can kind of buy into it. And I think it's a really modern way of looking at the wrestling business. But yeah.
Awesome. All right. Do not be a stranger. You are welcome back to my show anytime you are looking to feature something new, especially if you get that AEW game landing on your board. Oh my God. I'll clear the deck. I will have that feature that
if
all
that
up and
happens,
down.
you'll be the first to know.